If you know me, you know I'm one of those strange people who walk around town with their parrots on their shoulders. I love my birds, and I take them whenever I can. The area where I live is full of wildlife, especially all kinds of beautiful birds, but mostly pigeons, which is great for someone like me. We even put up a feeder to help support the local visitors. Lots of them stop by, none of them as faithful as a pair of doves. We named Daisy and Dave. They came every single day to eat, even though the feeder was way too small and awkward for them to use. They did learn to use it eventually, but one day the inevitable happened, and the little feeder fell and broke. And since then, we hadn't seen much of them. So I think it's time for an upgrade search. We settled on a sort of pentagonal gazebo, using some inspo pics from Pinterest, and after figuring out some rough measurements, I started going to work. Since I didn't really have a full plan for what to do, I figured I'd start with the base and then work my way up from there. For the base, I cut 5 pieces and then stapled and glued them together. Normally I try a little harder with my joinery, but I wanted this project to be simple and quick. For extra rigidity, I put another set of staples on the other side. Now, most bird feeders that I could find online just had a solid base. I feel like that doesn't make sense. The base is gonna collect all the bird poo and collect rainwater, so I ordered a stainless steel net and attached that to the frame. This way any water and poo can just run through without making the whole thing get moldy. By sandwiching the net between a second pentagon, it hides the ragged edges of the net and makes sure no birds get hurt. I'm using a polyurethane glue for this, because it expands while curing and bonds to both metal and wood. Additionally, it is waterproof, so ideal for outdoor use. The next thing I want to work on were the 5 pillars that will hold up the roof. I don't really get to use my lathe often, and I'm not very good with it, but it was a Christmas present from before I got my workshop, and I really enjoy using it. So whenever I do get the chance to pull it out, I'm happy. I'm leaving both the top and the bottom of the pillar square, so I'll be able to attach more things to them. After screwing the pillars to the base, I can now make the railing for the gazebo. To do that, I'm first cutting a couple strips and then gluing and nailing them together. It's going to make my base for the fencing to attach to. For the fencing itself, I just cut a bunch of thin strips and then glued them together using some standard wood glue. To be honest, I'm not sure how well this is going to hold up over the years, but I'm going to apply a good amount of paint, which should not only protect the glue from the elements, but also add strength, and there won't be any major forces acting onto the fence. With the fence panel glued up, I can now cut it into 5 smaller panels. I'm using the board on top to make the cutting a little bit safer. Again, I'm just attaching these parts with wood glue, as these parts are more decorative than anything else. Normally, I show you in a little bit more detail how I make these parts and how they go through the planer, or at what angle I'm cutting them. But I wanted to keep this video a little simpler. This next part is a little bit more interesting, so I wanted to show you that. Because the top of the fence panels are exposed and might get ripped off, I wanted to make a little railing to protect them. To do this, I first rounded off the top of a piece of wood to give it a little bit more shape. Then, at the table saw, I'm cutting almost all the way through. Then I turn it around and cut the rest of the way from the other side, but a little offset from the previous cut. This creates a little ledge. If this part was bigger, I could have done this with the router, but since these parts are so small, I had to get a little bit more creative. These railings fit perfectly on top and protect the edge of the fence. Next, I wanted to make something to attach to the top of the pillars. This part is not just for looks, but also has a structural function to give the pillars strength at the top and stop them from bending. Also, in a real gazebo, they would be an essential part to holding up the rafters. But in my case, I wanted to do it a little bit different. By making another pentagon, just the same as I made for the base, and attaching that to the top, it gives me a solid surface to attach my rafters to. Which, now that I'm writing this, doesn't seem too necessary, since I did end up attaching them to the pillars. But as I was saying before, I didn't actually have proper plans for how to build this, and I was more going off of vibes than proper construction. For the rafters, I cut 45-degree angles on both ends and then directly screwed them to the pentagon. I also cut 2 angles at the side of the rafters to match the angles of the pentagon and give me something for the roof to attach to. I deliberately left the rafters a little bit short, and that is because traditionally with a gazebo, the rafters all connect with the central hub. To make the central hub, I got my lathe back out. There are many different designs for these hubs, but I wanted to go with a simple sphere. In between turning, I sometimes took it out to check the fit of the hub. And I ended up tapering it so it would sit more snug in the center. Then I could simply connect the rafters to the hub with screws. I'm going to put a base layer of paint down now before I attach the roof, because I figured it would be easier to reach everywhere. Which was true, but honestly, not by that much. You might notice holes in random places like the pillars, and that's because I'm actually making this out of my house. Or rather, the old walls that I tore out of my house. So there are some old nail holes in them, but I figured making something with them is better than just throwing them out. To make the roof construction easier for myself and ensure better waterproofing, I'm attaching panels directly to the rafters. I'm simply scribing them and then cutting them to size at the bandsaw. This doesn't give me a perfect fit, but for this is more than good enough. Then I can simply attach the panels with nails. Now, for the shingles, I didn't really have a plan, but I figured I'd just make a strip with a bunch of waves to look like individual shingles, and after cutting the first one out at the bandsaw, I could simply copy it onto more strips using my router, and then refine the shape a little at the bandsaw. This didn't give me the best results, but I really didn't plan this out well enough, and I think the wonky look of the shingles makes them look a little more unique. Again, I'm just attaching them with nails and then cutting the ends by hand. Then I'm taking another layer and attaching it a little above, making sure to alternate the shingles positions. And by continuing this all the way up the roof, I'd say I got something that looks pretty realistic, and I'm really happy with the results. After a while, I got annoyed with hand cutting, so I got my multi-tool out, and I'm so glad I did, because this was so much quicker and easier. I didn't really know what to do to connect all the way to the top, but I figured that would be a problem for later. And later is now, because I wasn't gonna make you sit through hours of attaching shingles. After a bunch of trial and error, I figured out how to make this little angle pentagon that would fit on top. I'm sanding the top flat so that I can attach another piece to it and make it completely sealed from the top. Now, before we get to this next step, I need to talk to you about safety in the workshop. Ever since I started this channel, I sometimes show slightly sketchy stuff I do, and you guys really like to tell me about anything I do wrong. And while I can tell myself that I'm experienced enough to safely do these things, as a YouTuber, I'm still sort of a role model to you guys. So lately I've been cutting anything out that might look a little sketch, but this one I wanted to show you. I wanted to quickly get rid of some excess material so that I wouldn't have to sand so much, and didn't want to change my bandsaw table because then I'd have to reset it again to 90, and that just felt like a quick and easy thing that wasn't worth the effort. But while bandsaws are generally one of the safer tools, they still need to be used correctly. When you don't have any support under the workpiece, the blade can get pinched by the workpiece, which forcefully slams the piece down into the table and very possibly your fingers into the blade. Luckily, nothing happened, and for some reason, I still felt comfortable enough to repeat this cut a second time. After this incredible time saver, I can now just quickly sand the edges flush. Now, to be able to fit this over the central hub, I'm simply drilling a hole right in the center. Now it fits over and I can attach it with some glue and nails. To hide the ugly cut edges of the shingles and give the roof a more finished look, I cut some strips to attach onto the roof. To be able to fit them nicely though, I had to cut part of the shingles off. For this, the multi-tool really came in handy again. Then I could use the expanding polyurethane glue again and some nails to keep them in place. because all of this is a little bit of a hack job and I still wanted it to be watertight. I'm putting some sealant anywhere I feel like wasn't tight enough, especially the top. Now, with the power of editing magic, we can apply a whole layer of paint with one touch of the brush. And then with the base layer applied, we can give the roof a nice coat of brown. With all the paint applied, we can now focus our attention towards a way to mount this thing. I wanted to attach this somewhere near where the old bird feeder used to be, so the birds would know where to go. And additionally, I'd be able to watch them from my kitchen window. I'm first cutting out two identical pieces that would look pretty attached to the bottom of the gazebo, and then attaching them together using screws. Now, because I wanted to attach this with the corner to a post, I needed to add something to give a flat side to attach it securely. After giving the mount a quick sanding and pre-drilling some holes, I can now apply the final bit of paint. And with that, we can get to mounting. Seems pretty sturdy. Like there, fire. Let's fill her up. So this is the old feeder. And this bad boy is the new one. I hope the birds like it. It actually took the birds quite a while to get comfortable with the new feeder. We still had a couple visitors come by, sit near it, but no one was brave enough to use it. Until eventually 2 doves came by to finally give the new feeder a try. And wouldn't you know it, it's no other than Daisy and Dave. Get all bits.